So, I want you to picture something for a second.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You are standing right in front of a door, and it's this, really old door, maybe heavy oak, iron hinges, the kind of wood that just looks like it has absorbed centuries of secrets.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a strong image.
Right, and it's locked. And beneath the crack at the very bottom, there is just no light shining through at all. It is just absolute suffocating darkness.
Nothing but pitch black.
Exactly. Now, common sense, like literally every evolutionary survival instinct you possess, is screaming at you to walk away.
Because there could be literally anything in there.
Yeah, exactly. It's telling you to go back to the warmth, go back to the light, to the people you actually know. But instead, you reach out, your hand closes around this cold iron handle. And I guess my question for you today is why? Like, why are you so undeniably drawn to open it?
Well, it's because the urge to know what lies in the dark is ultimately just stronger than the instinct to stay in the light.
Even when it's terrifying.
Especially when it's terrifying. I mean, we
Yeah.
spend all of our energy building these really safe, predictable lives, right?
Yeah.
Constructing these elaborate societal walls just to keep all the chaos out.
Right, like paying mortgages and mowing lawns and, following the rules.
Exactly. And yet the very moment we feel perfectly secure, we just instinctively begin scanning the perimeter for cracks. We want to know where the wall is weak.
Which is wild when you think about it. And that's actually exactly what we're looking at today in this deep dive. We're looking at the architecture of the Gothic.
Yes, the grand architecture of fear.
Yeah, because we are going to completely deconstruct how humanity uses ghosts and monsters and crumbling ruins to process our deepest societal and personal anxiety.
It's such a massive topic.
It is, but there is this central thesis in our source material today. It's basically the lens through which we have to view this entire genre. And that thesis is that Gothic literature is, at its core, the literature of thresholds.
Literature of thresholds.
Sure.
I love that phrasing so much.
Right. It means it doesn't just exist entirely in the dark. It exists right on that doorway.
Yeah, liminality is really the operational engine of the whole genre.
Liminality meaning being in between things.
Exactly. If we're defining this architecture of the in-between, we really have to look at the boundaries the Gothic specifically chooses to straddle.
Like which boundaries?
Well, it's the razor's edge between reason and superstition, for one,
Mm-hmm.
or between civilization and the wilderness, life and death.
So you aren't fully immersed in either state. You're just kind of trapped in the transition.
You're trapped in the transition, yeah. Let's look at the actual mechanics of that threshold. Because standing in a doorway is fundamentally different from just being inside a room.
Oh, absolutely. Like if you are standing in the doorway of your brightly lit, heavily fortified house and you're looking out into the pitch black woods, it's a completely different feeling.
It is, because you aren't subject to the rules of the house anymore. Right. But you also haven't entirely surrendered to the wild.
You're just hovering.
You are in this totally suspended zone of reality. Inside the house, the rules of the Enlightenment apply.
Reason, logic, categorization, safety, all that good stuff.
Exactly, all the comfortable things. But out there in the deep woods, the rules of pure, chaotic nature apply. Survival, predation, the absolute unknown.
And the threshold is literally the only place where those two conflicting paradigms can interact.
Right. The rules of normal reality just don't function on that doorway.
Which means it's a zone of ultimate vulnerability. But I guess it's also the only place where true interrogation can happen.
Interrogation of what we're afraid of, you mean?
Yeah, like if you really want to explore humanity's deepest fears and greatest mysteries, you can't just do it from the safety of the living room couch.
No, you definitely can't.
You have to actually let the cold air of superstition hit your face while the firelight of reason, warms your back.
That is a beautiful way to put it.
But that actually brings up a really interesting mechanical question from the text. Does standing on that threshold actually generate the fear, or does the doorway simply act as a mirror for the darkness that is already hiding within the human mind?
Oh, it's a reflective surface, 100%.
Really? So the fear is already there.
The anxiety is completely pre-existing. The Gothic doesn't invent the terror out of thin air. It just provides a recognizable shape for it.
It gives it a face.
Exactly. It's fundamentally a literary response to uncertainty. Like when you look at the historical flashpoints where this genre truly explodes in popularity, it's never random.
Oh, right. The text mentioned this. It always coincides with periods of massive upheaval.
Yeah, social upheaval, huge scientific discoveries, religious doubt, massive political revolutions.
So basically, when the foundational structures of reality start vibrating, the The Gothic is just the cultural subconscious asking what exactly is causing the tremor.
Precisely. Think about a period of intense religious doubt or a violent political revolution.
Like the French Revolution, maybe?
Perfect example. Absolute truths are being completely dismantled. The divine right of kings is being challenged with literal guillotine.
Yeah, that'll definitely challenge a paradigm.
Right. Or, say, a new scientific discovery shatters the agreed-upon age of the Earth.
Oh, and suddenly nobody knows how old anything is anymore.
Exactly. That creates a massive vacuum of certainty. People no longer know the fundamental rules of existence. And nature, especially human psychology, just absolutely abhors a vacuum.
But wait, let me push back on that for a second, because if the real world is already a completely terrifying place,
Right.
like if society is dealing with literal revolutions, the guillotine, massive scientific upheavals that are fundamentally altering day-to-day reality, why would people actively seek out terrifying fiction?
It seems backwards, right?
Totally backwards. If my reality is falling apart, I don't want to read about a haunted castle. I want escapism. I want, like, a comedy. Reading terror when you are already terrified just seems entirely counterintuitive to me.
On the surface, I mean, it absolutely does. But psychologically, it functions as a really brilliant form of exposure therapy.
Exposure therapy, how so?
Well, when real-world anxieties are abstract and pervasive, like, say, the feeling that our political system is collapsing or our understanding of God is fundamentally flawed.
Things you can't just punch in the face.
Exactly. That creates this unmanageable, totally free-floating dread. You can't fade a paradigm shift. You
Yeah.
can't lock your doors against a failing economy, right?
No, you definitely can't. You just have to sit there and stress about it.
But if a clever writer distills all of that pervasive abstract dread into a localized physical entity, it changes everything.
Like making the failing economy into a ghost.
Yes. A ghost haunting a specific hallway or a terrifying monster bound to one specific castle, suddenly the terror becomes manageable.
I get it now. Because the monster has actual rules. The haunting has physical borders.
Exactly. And most importantly, you can close the book.
Wow. Yeah, you can just shut the cover and the monster's gone.
The reader gets to process the very real, visceral emotion of terror, but they get to do it in a highly controlled environment. The Gothic takes all that invisible societal rot and makes it totally visible and bounded.
Which actually makes the whole trope of the haunted castle an absolute stroke of genius.
It really is.
Because if society is experiencing an upheaval where the old kings or the old gods are being overthrown, the massive ancient castle with a crumbling foundation isn't just like a spooky setting for a story.
No, it's highly symbolic.
It is the literal embodiment of the establishment. It's the old way of doing things, and it is rotting from the inside out.
The architecture is the ideology. The decay of the physical stone completely mirrors the decay of the ruling class.
And what about the ghosts?
Well, the ghosts that haunt those dark corridors, they are the past sins. They are the buried crimes, the historical guilt of that establishment that is just stubbornly refusing to stay dead.
Man, that is so cool. And this actually brings us to the actual ignition point of the genre, right?
Yes, the true starting line.
The year is 1764. Horace Walpole publishes this book called The Castle of Otranto.
A hugely important text.
Yeah, he essentially acts as the primary architect who first synthesized all these weird elements together.
He built the first real haunted house, literally speaking.
He did. He took the medieval setting, injected these crazy supernatural events, layered it with really intense family intrigue, and then just wrapped the entire thing in this thick atmospheric terror.
Walpole definitely established the blueprint, no question.
Right.
But the true ideological weaponization of the genre happened slightly later.
Oh, really? When was that?
The Gothic really flourished during the Romantic era, specifically as a direct, almost aggressive counter-movement to the Enlightenment.
Okay, let's talk about the friction there, because the Enlightenment, it was an era completely obsessed with illumination.
Yes, turning the lights on everywhere.
Right. It was this deeply held belief that human intellect could just shine a spotlight into every dark corner of the universe, that we could categorize every living thing, explain every physical law, and ultimately just completely master reality.
The Enlightenment promoted a very mechanistic view of the universe.
Like a machine.
Exactly like a machine.
Yeah.
They viewed the universe as a giant, incredibly orderly clock. And the thought process was, if we could just understand all the individual gears, we could control the entire machine.
Which sounds a bit arrogant, honestly.
And that's exactly how the Romantic movement felt.
Yeah.
The Romantics, and by extension the Gothic writers of that time, viewed that Enlightenment arrogance as profoundly dangerous.
Why dangerous?
Because they felt that constantly categorizing and dissecting the world was stripping it of its essential soul. And more importantly, it was actively denying the very real limits of human cognition.
So if the Enlightenment was like a sterile, brightly lit laboratory where they are trying to pin the world down and categorize it, then the Gothic was basically a violent thunderstorm, just completely shattering the lab windows.
That is the exact level of disruption they were aiming for, yes. The Enlightenment championed pure reason, but the Gothic wanted to explore raw emotion, wild imagination, and paralyzing terror.
And the ultimate tool they used to shatter that laboratory window was this concept of the sublime.
The sublime, yes. It's so critical to understand this.
And we should definitely clarify for you listening at home, we aren't talking about the modern kind of watered down use of the word sublime.
Right, like saying, oh, that's a sublime piece of cake.
Exactly, not a cake. We are talking about an intense psychological state. It's humanity's direct encounter with forces that are just vastly larger and more powerful than itself.
Forces that induce a crazy mixture of awe and absolute paralyzing terror.
So what does that actually feel like?
Well, the sublime is essentially the sudden realization of your own utter insignificance.
Oh.
Yeah, right. The Romantic Gothic writers use these vast mountains, violent oceans, ancient ruins, and just generally forgotten hostile landscapes to trigger this exact state in their readers.
It's the feeling of standing right at the edge of a towering cliff, looking down, or being in a tiny little wooden ship during a massive ocean squall.
Yes, perfect examples.
You realize very abruptly that all of your science, all of your philosophy, all of your polite societal rules, they mean absolutely nothing in the face of this sheer scale.
The ocean doesn't care about your philosophy degree.
No. The universe could crush you in an instant, and it literally wouldn't even notice. I mean, you can't categorize a hurricane while it's actively tearing your house apart.
Which completely shatters the Enlightenment's precious illusion of human control.
It forces you to just be small.
Right. The sublime induces a profound psychological state because it forcibly reminds the reader that human reason has hard, uncrossable borders. There are forces in the natural world that just simply cannot be tamed by intellect.
But here is where the evolution of the genre takes a really massive pivot, according to our deep dive sources today.
Yeah, very dark pivot.
Yeah. Walpole and the Romantics, they were looking outward, right? They were looking at medieval castles, vast mountain ranges, violent storms to find that sublime terror.
They were looking at the external world.
Right. But as we move into the 19th century, the next generation of writers realized something even scarier. They realized that the most terrifying, untamable landscape wasn't a mountain range at all.
No, not at all. It was the human mind itself.
The threshold shifted entirely.
Completely inward. We see this shift most clearly in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and, of course, the collective works of Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, yes.
They orchestrated this massive inward turn that fundamentally changed the whole trajectory of the genre forever.
Let's start with Shelley, because she took the very tools that the Enlightenment championed, science, reason, the laboratory, the pursuit of human progress.
Gears of the clock.
Exactly. And she turned them into the direct source of the horror. I mean, in Otranto, the monster is basically a ghost from the medieval past, but in Frankenstein, the monster is a direct byproduct of human ambition.
It's the future that's terrifying in Shelley's work, not the past.
Yeah, that's such a wild flip.
It is. Shelley shifts the anxiety from the magical and supernatural to the cold and scientific. The terror comes entirely from the massive responsibility of creation.
Like, what happens when our intellect just totally outpaces our morality?
Precisely. The monster isn't some external demon summoned by an evil witch. It is painstakingly constructed on a sterile operating table by an educated man of science.
I mean, the primary threat moves from outside the heavy castle door to inside the modern laboratory.
Yes. And then Poe takes it even a step further than that.
He bypasses the laboratory entirely.
Entirely. He moves the terror straight into the protagonist's own skull.
Which is arguably way worse.
Oh, it's terrifying. Poe internalized the Gothic completely. If Shelley's monster is the byproduct of scientific ambition, Poe's monsters are the literal manifestations of guilt, obsession, and just total psychological decay.
But he still used castles and stuff, right?
He did. He used the established tropes, the haunted house, the crumbling ruins, but he stripped them of their literal physical meaning and completely repurposed them as psychological architecture.
Oh, right. Like in The Fall of the House of Usher, the house isn't just a creepy building with a bad foundation and a structural crack.
No, not at all.
The crack in the masonry is the literal crack in Roderick Usher's mind. The decay is entirely internal.
Exactly. Poe forces the reader onto a completely different threshold. It's no longer the doorway between the safe house and the dark woods.
What is then?
It's the boundary between the conscious rational mind and the dark, repressed, terrifying basement of the subconscious.
Wow. Which essentially makes Poe a kind of cartographer of the subconscious, right? Like way before clinical psychology was even formalized.
Oh, absolutely. He's writing decades before Freud or Jung are publishing any of their major theories.
And yet he's meticulously mapping out neurosis, repressed trauma, the total disintegration of the ego.
And he's doing it just using the spooky vocabulary of the Gothic.
He basically figured out that the ultimate terror isn't a ghost hiding in the attic. It's the realization that you cannot trust your own perceptions.
There's nothing scarier than that.
Because you are entirely trapped inside a failing mind. You are the haunted house.
You are. And this internal psychological dread didn't just stay static. It kept mutating.
As things always do.
Right. As the 19th century marched on, it mutated again. This time, it latched onto the massive social shifts and the really deep-seated paranoias of the Victorian age.
So the internal rot became a societal rot.
Exactly. The Victorian Gothic is just fascinating because it introduces an entirely new lexicon of anxiety to the audience.
Right, because this is when we start seeing doubles, ghosts, vampires, and this just overwhelming, suffocating fear of something they call degeneration.
Degeneration, yes. To understand the Victorian Gothic, you really have to understand the intense hypocrisy of the era itself.
Paint a picture for us. What was Victorian society actually like?
Well, the Victorians built an immense, incredibly powerful global empire. They enforced extremely strict social morality at home, and they maintained these rigid, unbending class structures.
They basically believed they had won history.
They really did. They believed they were the absolute pinnacle of human civilization. But right beneath that highly polished, hyper-civilized, polite surface, there was a profound, gnawing anxiety that it was all just an illusion.
Because of Darwin.
Largely, yes. Charles Darwin publishes On the Origin of Species, and suddenly the entire foundation of human exceptionalism is just violently yanked away.
Because if humanity naturally evolved from a lower state to reach this grand pinnacle of civilization, then the terrifying flip side of that scientific reality is devolution.
That is the core of degeneration theory right there.
It was the absolute dread that an individual, or honestly an entire society, could just slide backward down the evolutionary ladder.
That they could revert to an animalistic, primitive, totally unrestrained state.
So the higher you build the pedestal of civilization, the more terrified you become of falling off of it.
Exactly. It's a long way down. And this intense fear of degeneration spawned very specific literary tropes, most notably the concept of the double.
Oh, I love the double trope.
It's so good. You see it perfectly encapsulated in works like The Picture of Dorian Gray or, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Right, where the monster is no longer a totally separate external entity. It is literally a fractured piece of the protagonists themselves.
Yes, you have the civilized, highly educated, polite Victorian gentleman on the outside operating perfectly in polite society.
Sipping tea and being proper.
Doing everything right. But lurking just beneath the skin is the degenerate, completely unrestrained beast, driven purely by raw appetite and violent impulses.
Hyde isn't a magical curse from a witch. He's just the repressed, animalistic id of Jekyll finally let off the leash.
And that double perfectly represents the hypocrisy of an empire that aggressively preached morality at home while enacting brutal violence abroad.
Man, it really is just a mirror, isn't it?
It's always a mirror. And, it wasn't just internal devolution they feared. It was also external contamination.
Oh, right. Which brings us to my absolute favorite monster, the vampire.
The ultimate Victorian threat. Look at Carmilla and Dracula. The vampire is the absolute manifestation of the fear of social change and reverse colonization.
I really want to break down the specific mechanics of the vampire because they operate so differently from, like, a werewolf or a mindless zombie.
They are highly sophisticated.
Very. A vampire is typically an aristocratic figure from the past, right? Like representing the old, barbaric, medieval world. And they travel directly into the modern, bustling, highly civilized metropolis of Victorian London.
And they literally feed on the citizenry.
They do. They subvert the established order from within.
Right, they don't arrive with a massive, loud, invading army. They arrive very quietly, in the dark, usually in a coffin.
And they turn proper, chaste, rule-following Victorian citizens into creatures of pure, unrestrained appetite.
The vampire is basically a walking embodiment of a social infection.
They look like us. They move smoothly through our high society, but they operate by an entirely different, incredibly predatory set of rules.
Exactly. But, there is a massive contradiction happening in this specific era that we need to talk about.
The contradiction? What do you mean?
Well, we have all these authors using the Gothic to heavily explore emerging theories of hard psychology. The subconscious, the id, the ego.
Right, getting very scientific about the brain.
But at the exact same time, the late 19th century was completely obsessed with spiritualism, occultism, and folklore.
Oh, that's true. They were holding all those seances, trying to photograph ghosts, communicating via spirit boards in the parlor.
Yes. So weren't the emerging hard sciences of clinical psychology and the deeply mystical practices of spiritualism fundamentally at war with each other?
Well, in the real world, yes, definitely. The psychoanalysts and the spiritualists were often fighting for the exact same cultural territory. They both wanted to explain the unknown.
Right. So how do they coexist in the literature?
Because you have to remember the core architecture of our genre here. It is the literature of thresholds.
Ah, the liminal space again.
Exactly. It is a liminal space. Therefore, it is literally the only ideological space flexible enough to hold both of those conflicting paradigms simultaneously.
That makes so much sense. So a ghost in a Victorian novel operates on two different frequencies at once.
Yes. It can be interpreted as a literal supernatural spirit returning from the dead, which completely satisfies the spiritualist worldview.
Okay.
Or it can be read entirely as an externalized hallucination born of a guilty, collapsing conscience, which perfectly satisfies the psychological worldview.
It lets the reader choose their own terror.
Right. The Gothic allowed Victorian society to entertain both possibilities without ever firmly committing to either one. It was basically the ultimate testing ground for conflicting ideas about human nature.
And those Victorian texts are just so potent, their iconography is so unbelievably strong, that they still largely define the baseline of what we think of today when we hear the word Gothic.
Oh, for sure. If I say Gothic, you think Dracula and castles.
But the genre didn't just die with Queen Victoria. It shattered. It completely refracted into dozens of modern mutations, all carrying that exact same core DNA.
It evolved into this incredible, messy array of subgenres. You've got cosmic horror, weird fiction, Southern Gothic, folk horror, supernatural thrillers, psychological horror.
Dark fantasy, paranormal fiction, the list just goes on.
It's a massive, sprawling genetic family tree of terror. But beneath all those different labels and book covers, they are all operating from the exact same shared toolbox.
Let's open that toolbox. What's inside?
Well, we're looking at core themes like haunted places and liminal spaces, obviously. The sudden return of the past, family secrets and inherited guilt.
Forbidden knowledge is a big one.
Huge. Madness and psychological instability. Religious anxiety. A deep sense of isolation and alienation. And of course, death and decay.
But to understand how this toolbox functions in the modern era, you really can't just look at the individual themes in isolation.
Oh.
No, they form compound reactions. Like chemistry. The way you combine these specific themes dictates the exact flavor of the anxiety you're trying to produce.
Okay, let's analyze some of those compound reactions then. Take Southern Gothic, for example.
A great subgenre.
Yeah. If you combine family secrets, inherited guilt, and the return of the past, you get the exact psychological mechanism that drives Southern Gothic.
Because in that subgenre, the ghost isn't usually a literal see-through phantom in a bedsheet rattling chain.
No, it's way heavier than that. The ghost is the heavy history of a family's literal crimes, often deeply tied to the brutal legacy of slavery or just deep-seated generational corruption.
And it's a past that the current generation absolutely cannot escape no matter how hard they try.
The past in a Southern Gothic narrative just refuses to stay buried. It's always bubbling up through the floorboards.
And the physical setting shifts too. The crumbling plantation house totally replaces the medieval castle, but it serves the exact same symbolic function.
Right, it is a rotting, humid monument to a failed, corrupt establishment.
And the inherited guilt part of that equation is honestly the ultimate form of being haunted.
Oh, I totally agree. If we look at the isolation and alienation theme from our toolbox, I would argue that inherited guilt isolates you way more profoundly than just being trapped in an empty, spooky house.
Because you are morally isolated.
Yes, you are morally and chronologically isolated. You are completely alienated because you are haunted by something you didn't even personally do.
You are carrying a heavy moral debt you didn't incur, but society still forces you to pay the interest.
Man, that is a deeply pessimistic reading of the genre's mechanics.
Pessimistic, but highly accurate. Inherited guilt essentially implies that your destiny was written and completely corrupted before you were even born.
You were just chained to the terrible actions of ancestors you never even knew.
Let's look at another combination from the toolbox.
Okay, what do you have?
If you pair religious anxiety with forbidden knowledge and the encounter with the sublime that we talked about earlier,
Oh, I know where this is going.
you get the exact recipe for cosmic horror or weird fiction.
Yes. Because cosmic horror relies entirely on scale rather than personal guilt. The protagonist isn't haunted by some dark family secret in the attic. They are haunted by the sudden realization of humanity's utter insignificance in the universe.
Right, a character digs way too deep into an ancient text, or they explore a forgotten alien ruin and they suddenly learn a forbidden truth about the universe.
And the truth isn't that they are personally cursed by a ghost.
No, the truth is that the gods are completely indifferent, unfathomable, tentacled monstrosities just floating in the cold void of space.
And the sheer weight of that forbidden knowledge completely shatters their religious worldview and their sanity, like simultaneously.
Notice how that is just a very modern mutation of the romantic sublime we discussed.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Instead of a vast mountain range making the protagonist feel tiny and powerless, it's the vastness of an indifferent cosmos.
The psychological trigger is exactly the same, just scaled up.
What about folk horror? Where does that fit into the compound reactions?
Folk horror relies really heavily on the collision between isolation and the return of the past.
Like traveling to a creepy village.
Exactly. You usually have a very modern, rational, enlightened protagonist who travels to a remote, geographically isolated community.
Cell service goes out.
Always.
Oh.
Only to discover that the community has completely rejected modernity. They are still actively practicing ancient, often brutal pagan rituals.
So the threshold in folk horror isn't a heavy oak doorway. It's a literal city limit sign.
Yes. It's the stark boundary between the paved, brightly lit roads of the modern city and the ancient, blood-soaked soil of the deep countryside.
And the anxiety comes from the realization that modern civilization is incredibly fragile, and the old ways are just patiently waiting in the woods for us to drop our guard. It's terrifying. But ultimately, all of these mutations, whether it's the inherited guilt of the South, the cosmic insignificance of weird fiction, or the pagan dread of folk horror, they all serve one primary philosophical purpose.
And this is honestly perhaps the most crucial mechanical insight of the entire deep dive today.
The real core of it.
Yes, and it's that Gothic literature fundamentally asks questions rather than providing answers.
Which, if you think about it, violates almost every single established rule of satisfying storytelling.
It totally does. Human beings are fundamentally wired to seek closure. We want the brave detective to catch the killer. We want the knight to slay the dragon. We want the grand mystery to be neatly unraveled and explained in the final chapter.
We want the bow tied on top.
Exactly. But the Gothic actively, stubbornly refuses to give us that satisfaction. It just presents these massive, uncomfortable questions.
Questions like, are the ghosts actually real, or is the protagonist just hallucinating from grief?
Is the monster a physical, biting threat, or just an externalized manifestation of internal childhood trauma? Is the haunted house literally cursed by a demon? Or is it simply reflecting the buried, horrible ugliness of the normal people living inside it?
And the refusal of closure is not like a flaw in the storytelling. It is a deliberate, necessary philosophical choice.
Think about the psychological mechanics of an answer for a second. If a story tells you definitively that the ghost is 100% real, that it has a very specific, tragic backstory, and that it can be easily banished by burning its old bones.
The terror instantly evaporates.
Instantly. Because it just becomes a logistical problem, not an existential threat.
You just go get some gasoline and a match, and you solve the problem.
Exactly. The universe is orderly again. You have successfully categorized the unknown, exactly like the Enlightenment guys wanted.
But if the story ends and you are left just staring at the wall, wondering whether the ghost was a supernatural entity or if the protagonist simply lost their mind due to overwhelming, crushing guilt.
The terror lingers. It bleeds right off the page and into the reader's actual reality. It forces you to genuinely confront the ambiguity of existence itself.
The Gothic isn't a cure for our cultural anxiety, it's a diagnosis.
That's beautifully said. And that third question you mentioned, whether the house is magically cursed or simply revealing truths its inhabitants wish to ignore,
Yeah.
that is easily the most devastating question of all. Because if the house is just a mirror, it means the true horror isn't supernatural at all. The true horror is human denial.
Because if the monster's a demon, you can physically fight it. You can get a priest. But if the monster is your own personal capacity for cruelty or your entire society's willful, stubborn ignorance, how do you fight that?
You can't. You just have to sit in the dark with the discomfort.
By leaving these massive questions unanswered, the Gothic forces the reader to look directly into the mirror. It strips away the incredibly comforting illusion that the evil is out there, in the woods.
And suggests that the evil is, and honestly always has been, right here in the room with us.
Man, this is exactly why the genre endures, isn't it?
It is. It survives because it uniquely occupies the borderlands of human experience. It is a permanent, open invitation to explore the margins.
As long as humanity possesses anxieties, as long as there are fundamental, terrifying mysteries we simply cannot categorize or control, we will always need the Gothic to map those borderlands for us.
So true.
So if we trace this incredible evolution all the way back from the beginning for you guys, we started in 1764 with Horace Walpole constructing the very first architectural manifestation of terror in Otranto.
A huge milestone.
Then we watched the Romantics completely weaponize the sublime, using vast oceans and violent landscapes to shatter the Enlightenment's fragile illusion of control.
Shattering the laboratory windows.
Exactly. Then we followed the threshold entirely inward with Mary Shelley and Edgar Allan Poe, discovering that the most terrifying monsters aren't hiding in the woods at all. They are born in our sterile laboratories and they fester in our collapsing minds.
The dark realization.
Very. Then we navigated the profound, suffocating paranoias of the Victorian era, where the intense fear of Darwinian degeneration birthed doubles and vampires to perfectly embody the hypocrisy of a massive empire.
The society eating itself.
And finally, we unpacked the shared, mutated DNA that fuels everything from modern cosmic tentacle dread to the inescapable inherited guilt of the deep Southern Gothic.
What a journey. And through every single era, the core function honestly remains identical.
It's our most reliable literary response to cultural uncertainty.
Yes. When the foundational pillars of our society begin to crack under the massive weight of paradigm shifts, the Gothic just rushes in to ask, what is waiting for us in the rubble?
Which really leaves us with a massive looming question for you to consider today.
The most important question.
Because the engine of the Gothic requires periods of social upheaval, scientific discovery, and profound cultural change to actually operate.
Right. It needs instability.
So look at the reality we are occupying right this second. We are living through an era of unparalleled, absolute breakneck scientific disruption.
Up and play.
We have the massive explosion of artificial intelligence fundamentally altering our entire concept of art, of human labor, of objective truth.
We have complex genetic engineering capable of literally rewriting the base code of life itself.
We are surrounded by incredibly convincing deepfakes, algorithmic emotional manipulation, and just massive, sprawling global political instability.
The ground is literally moving beneath our feet every single day.
The vacuum of certainty is opening up again, wider than it has been in a century.
It really is.
Exactly. So, what are the new haunted castles being built right now?
That is the question.
When future generations look back at our current, incredibly terrifying period of uncertainty, what brand new monsters will we have created to represent the shadows hiding just beyond our known world?
Will the new haunted house be a massive, humming server farm in the dark?
Will the new Gothic double be a perfect AI replication of our own voice calling us on the phone and telling us lies?
The threshold is shifting as we speak.
So keep questioning what lies on the other side of it.
And remember that the darkness isn't empty.
It never is.